Hello my loves, it's Monica and welcome back to a new video. I'm so excited today because I am going to be talking about so many books that I have read and loved over the past few months. Today I'm going to be sharing with you all my favorite books of 2021. So yeah, I initially wanted this to just be like my top 10 reads, but as I was going through my reading history over the last year, I realized that there are actually quite a few more books than I thought that I really enjoyed. So I was finally able to pare this down to 13 books, and normally I don't really do this in any particular order, but this year I thought it'd be fun to actually rank my favorites. So I'm going to be starting from lowest to highest. So I'll end with my number one book of the year. I would also love to hear from you. Let me know what your favorite books of the year were in the comments down below. I might make a little TBR just based off of some of your picks that you share with me, and also I just love seeing what you guys are reading and loving. Before I dive into sharing my own favorites of last year though, I do want to give a big thank you to this video's sponsor, which is Karma. And Karma is a mobile app and Google Chrome extension that ensures you never miss a price drop or coupon code. So to get started with Karma, just download the Chrome extension, which I've linked down below. Then as you're browsing online at any of your favorite stores, you can save items to Karma and get notifications via email or mobile push notifications when an item you've saved goes on sale or comes back in stock. And I love saving things in themed lists in Karma to stay organized. So for example, I have a list of spring and summer fashion bits, so I know when any of them go on sale or come back in stock. I especially love to use Karma because of how much it saves me through the selection of coupons that are automatically applied at checkout. This is a special feature when you use Karma on your computer, but basically Karma scans the web for any available coupon codes and automatically applies them at checkout. Like I mentioned, I've recently been adding items to my spring summer fashion list, and because of Karma, I was able to snag these amazing J. Crew ballet flats for 50% off of their already on sale price, which was amazing. Plus, when I make purchases from Karma's retail partners, I'm able to earn cash back, which definitely adds up. And you can use my link down below to check out Karma now. So kicking things off at number 13, I have The Memory Theater by Karen Tidbeck, and this book was definitely a total surprise for me. I had been excited to pick this one up for quite a while, to be honest, but I don't know, I never really knew what to expect with it. And this one is like, it's a total fairy tale. It's very much so like a fairy tale for adults. Feels very reminiscent of that like Brothers Grimm style of storytelling where things are whimsical but also like can be grotesque at the same time. It's set in this like enchanted forest, and in this forest there's this area where these adults live, and every single day is the same weather, the same activities, and the adults never age, and they just sort of like get to do whatever they want and like have a frivolous fun time, and they have like no real like idea of what even time is in this place, like very much so it just doesn't exist here. So you have these like immortal beings, and then they have these children who will get lost in the woods, and these adults will steal the children away and force them to work in servitude for them, and then once they become of age they are hunted and eaten by these adults. And so in this book we follow two kids. One is a child, a little boy who is abducted by these adults, and then the other is a little girl who is the daughter of one of these adults. And at the beginning of the novel, these two kids, they're best friends, and they end up running away together, and their journey sort of goes from there. This one definitely feels referential a bit to like Hansel and Gretel story, that sort of like witch in the woods sort of tale, and there is that sort of sense of foreboding, but at the same time it feels very uniquely its own story, especially with where it takes these characters and the sort of universe that it creates. And I really loved that element of it. It's a really short novel, but I feel like it creates in even that short amount of time a really compelling world, and it was one that I really very much so got swept away by and would have loved even more of. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this story. I feel like if you are someone who, like, the idea of an adult fairy tale sounds great to you, definitely would pick this one up. And even though our two protagonists are children, this is not a children's book. Yeah, it's definitely, I would definitely not recommend it for actual children. It's not middle grade, and the themes in it are very adult, and it deals with very dark themes in an adult way. But yeah, I just thought it was beautifully written and a beautiful story. I will say, when I first started it, I did not think I was going to like it. Because I very much so, like, probably the number one thing that, like, if it's included in a story, I tend to just not want to take part in the story at all, is any sort of, like, eating of people, like cannibalism or anything like that. Like, it makes me very nauseated, and I hate thinking about it. I hate depictions of it in anything. And so when this first started out, I was like, oh, I'm not going to be able to I'm not going to be able to read this. And I'm really glad that I stuck with it, because that is not, like, even though it's part of the story, it's definitely not, like, a huge part of the story, and, like, there aren't, like, depictions of it, thankfully. But yeah, that was, like, a big red flag for me at first, but I'm glad that I pushed through and kept reading it, because this was just such a delight of a story, and I really just loved falling into this very dark and whimsical world. So I would definitely recommend picking this one up. Then at number 12 is a recent book, probably I think the most recent read out of all of these, and that is The Keeper of Night by Kylie Lee Baker. And this is a YA historical fantasy novel. We follow Ren, and she is a half Japanese Shinigami and half British Reaper, and she grows up in London and has worked for centuries as a Reaper, where she collects souls of the dead, but she has always been taunted and ostracized and abused by her fellow Reapers because she is not seen as one of them. And so at the beginning of the novel, her Shinigami powers sort of, like, get out of control, and she causes something to happen that forces her to flee London with her younger brother, and they run to Japan, where she hopes to finally find her home and finally, like, find her mom and all of that. But instead, she's sort of met with a whole new set of, like, expectations and ways to be ostracized. And I really enjoyed this one for a few different reasons. One, I did really enjoy the depiction of being a diaspora or mixed race Asian person. I just think when you are Asian and you're brought up outside of Asia and you go back to an Asian, your homeland, or you are amongst people who are, who were raised within the place that you originally were from, it is a very specific sort of feeling, and it causes a very specific sort of emotion, and I feel like this book does a really good job of that. I also feel like in terms of the mixed race representation, I thought that was really, really well done. That sort of feeling of always feeling a sense of displacement and always feeling this need to prove yourself, or to hide yourself. I really related to that, and I feel like a lot of people with similar backgrounds will also relate to that and really find a sense of camaraderie in this story. So I really enjoyed that element of it, but I also just loved the world itself. Like, I thought the world building and the ways in which Japanese mythology was, like, woven throughout the story was, like, really fascinating and fun to read about. I loved the just whole concept of, like, being a Reaper and, like, these different ways cultures depict or the different ways in which cultures' beliefs, like, impact the ways in which each culture, like, deals with death, even in, like, a supernatural sense. It's actually something that I have been working on in my own writing, has been, trying to think about how every culture has its own sort of form of magic and how, that would actually impact magic. And so it was really cool to see that done in this book. I also really loved Ren's relationship with her brother. I loved seeing that sort of flesh out. And I really also enjoyed how dark this book was able to go. I actually had to look it up, like, around halfway through to see, like, if this book was adult or YA, because it got like pretty dark, and I felt like our main character Ren like gets very morally gray, and in a way that I am not used to really seeing in YA. So I really enjoyed that too. I love morally gray characters and characters who make bad decisions. Like I think that that's always really fun to read about, but also like I just feel like that can make for a really compelling story. And so I just really enjoyed that about Ren's story and her arc in general. And the ending definitely like totally blew my mind and has me very, very, very excited to see what's going to happen next in book 2, because it was a wild time. Then at number 11, I have The Forest of Stolen Girls by Junher. And Junher has like kind of become one of my favorite authors over the past few years. This is my second book by her, and I'm so excited for her third one, which comes out this year. Comes out very soon, I'm pretty sure, and I cannot wait to get my hands on it. This book, like Junher's other books, are set during the Joseon era in Korea, and in this one we follow Hwani, who is traveling to Jeju, and she's disguised herself as a boy because she is trying to figure out how her father went missing and to try and find her father. So basically, when her and her sister were little, they were both abducted, and they were both rescued, but they had no memory of what actually transpired that night. They don't know who abducted them. And then on this island, a string of kidnappings has occurred, and these girls keep going missing. And so she goes to this island. She kind of takes on the role of figuring out what's happening to these girls in order to follow in her father's footsteps. And her sister still lives on this island because she was basically abandoned by her father and family, and so she also is reconnecting with her sister. So it's a story of sisterhood, family, but also of Korea and just how girls were treated in Korea during this time period. I think this is a fantastic mystery novel, a fantastic historical fiction novel, and I just highly recommend Junher's stories. I feel like people who normally wouldn't pick up YA mystery tend to like not pick this one up because, I don't know, I feel like there's this perception of YA mystery just like not being good or being like very romance heavy and not really being like actually good mystery novels. And not that you can't have a good mystery novel with romance, but I feel like that is the perception. And I just want to put out there that like if you aren't picking these up because they are categorized as YA, I highly recommend checking them out still. I just feel like these are stories, or Junher's stories are ones that really can be enjoyed by a wide range of readers, and especially anyone who enjoys a good mystery, a good historical fiction novel. Like if either of those things are of interest to you, like just pick these books up. They're so good, and I really, really enjoy them. So I'm really excited for her third one to come out, but I just very much so loved this one this year. Then at number 10, I have A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson, and I read this one very early on in 2021, and I think about it all the time still. This is a very like gothic, romantic, like in writing, not like actually romantic, story. We basically follow Constanta, who is one of Dracula's brides, and it's an epistolary novel. It's told through letters to Dracula that she writes, and she writes at the beginning that she has killed him, and then the story sort of tells how that transpired. This was a book that I went into with no expectations. I don't think that there were really any like Goodreads reviews or YouTube reviews of this book when I went into it yet, and I just loved it. It was such a enthralling read for me. I loved how dramatic it was, how romantic the writing was, and I felt like it really depicted that sort of like the suffocating headiness of like what it must be like to be an eternal being and also to be trapped in a relationship that is extremely toxic. I'd say this is the perfect read for anyone who thinks that they would like this book. Like if you're into like Crimson Peak, like super gothic aesthetic kind of stories, I just feel like you'll love this one, no question. So yeah, definitely a favorite of mine this year. My next favorite read of 2021 is definitely The Chosen and the Beautiful by Nai Vo, and this one just totally took my breath away. I honestly went into it with really no expectations. I don't have like a strong personal love for The Great Gatsby, although I do have a love for like the romanticization of The Great Gatsby and the like aesthetic in the 1920s and all of that, just like every other person. But I was excited for this one because it was pitched as like a retelling of The Great Gatsby from Jordan Baker's point of view, and she is written as a Asian adoptee in America. And I will say that like I don't even know if I would consider this a retelling of The Great Gatsby, as I mean it is, but it isn't, you know, like it is telling that story, but I feel like it's telling a much larger story, and a completely different story through Jordan. Like it's her story, not Gatsby's story. But yeah, she is adopted by this rich white family, and so she exists in these very affluent circles, but even at the same time she is always sort of like held at arm's length away from everything, and always sort of like on the outside looking in, and always feels like an outsider, even in her what is supposed to be her home and amongst the people who are supposed to be her family and her friends. And I really loved the way that was depicted in this book. I thought it was done so beautifully. I also just like absolutely adored the magic in this story. I just felt like it was written in such a beautiful and whimsical way that honestly it felt just so normal. When I think of like the 1920s, like I think of, like a lot of people, I don't really conceptualize it as like a real point of time. Like for me, there is something about that time period that does sort of seem like tinged with magic, and I feel like this book really sort of brings that to life. Like it creates this feeling of the 1920s that like matches the way that I think people view it, if that makes sense. I don't know, I feel like it creates this really beautiful world, but at the same time it doesn't shy away from the darkness of that time period, and especially of the experience that you might have as an Asian person during that time period, which I thought was really important and really well done. But yeah, I just thought this was such a beautiful story. I think yes, it is inspired by and is retelling parts of The Great Gatsby, but it does it in a way that is wholly fresh and new and just completely goes beyond the original, and I adored it. So yeah, would definitely recommend. All right, so this next one might be a little polarizing because I think some people really love this book and some people really did not like it at all, and that is The Atlas Six by Olivia Blake. And I think I really lucked out in that I had not seen any of the online buzz about this book before picking it up. I literally was at Barnes & Noble and saw the spine, and like for some reason the spine just was intriguing to me, and then saw the actual cover and was like, oh, this cover is really cool, and bought it. And that was, and like, well, I read the synopsis and like it sounded like something I would love, and so I just bought it without really doing much research and having not really heard anything about it online before. And I think that really helped because now I know that this book is like went massively viral online, and that it's super popular on like YouTube, TikTok, Bookstagram. Like it's really popular everywhere basically, and I'm really happy that I didn't witness any of that, because I do think that my expectations would have been way too high for this book, and it would have never met those expectations for me. So I think not really expecting anything of it and just sort of going in and wanting to have a like fun fantasy time allowed me to have that. So that would be like my recommendation with this book, is that like there's a ton of buzz everywhere, and I feel like it completely oversells this book and like makes it out into something that it can never be. So reset your expectations, bring them down a little bit, and you might enjoy this book as much as I did, because this is definitely one of my favorite reads of the year. Basically, we follow a whole cast of characters, and each of them are magicians in their own way and have their own unique special abilities, and they basically get collected by this caretaker, Atlas, who brings them together in order to join the Alexandrian Society. And the Alexandrian Society basically has like the Library of Alexandria and all of these like lost pieces of literature, history and science that have been lost to time, or that are, you know, too advanced for our society today, and they have access to it, but no one else in the world does. So only the Alexandrian society. And so they're brought in every year. There are new people who are brought into the Alexandrian society to learn about it and join it and protect it. And if you become a part of the society, then you can also basically get a really big place in the world. My best comparison for this would be Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, but imagine it to be like a soap opera. This is definitely a lot more dramatic, and I really enjoyed that about it. I thought it was just really fun. I loved learning about all the different characters. I loved reading from all their perspectives. Each of them are complete messes in their own unique way, and horrible people in their own unique way, and I also really enjoyed that element of it. And I also just loved the plot of this book. I thought it went in places I was completely not expecting. It was such a fun time, and yeah, overall I really enjoyed this one. I will say I don't think it's a perfect novel by any means. There were parts of it where I was like, oh, I kind of wish this had been edited a bit tighter, and I am intrigued to see if anything changes with the new edition that's coming out from Tor. If they do edit the story at all with that would be amazing in my opinion. But regardless, I really did love this story so much this year, and it's definitely one that definitely a new favorite for me, and one that I will be continuing with series wise. Coming in at number 7 is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn, and this one was another total surprise for me. I kind of feel like I was expecting a YA fantasy that sort of read younger, and I think for me that's not really something that I am as keen to pick up as I used to be, but I actually really enjoyed this one. It is an Arthurian inspired story. Our main character is part of this early college program, and while there she sort of gets thrust into this world of this Arthurian secret society, with reborn people of the Round Table, Knights of the Round Table. The actual plot itself and the characters and the romance really pulled me in and just made me absolutely love this story. I love where everything went in this book, and it had me completely gripped. I also really loved the themes around what it's like to be a person of color, especially a Black girl, and going into a world that is very predominantly white and that is very entrenched in racism, and that has historically kind of tried to erase that racism. And I felt like the discussions around that were really well done and nuanced, and just added overall to the story and world itself. And again, I really loved the characters. I loved all the different relationships. I loved her friendship with her best friend and just how that developed. And I also really loved the depiction of grief, because she lost her mother before the beginning of the story, and I felt like the depiction of grief in this book was one of the better ones that I've seen in YA fantasy, where it truly felt like it had an impact on her character. Sometimes I feel like characters will experience grief in books and it's just sort of it just sort of feels like a plot device versus actually having an impact on who they are as a person. And I feel like in this book, Tracy Deonn did such a good job of depicting how grief changes you and impacts you. So yeah, I really enjoyed Legendborn overall. The ending, again, had me totally gripped, completely blew my mind, and I'm so excited for book 2. Then coming in at number 6, I have The First Sister by Lyndon A. Lewis, and this is a sci-fi novel, and I do want to pull out one thing that has frustrated me about this book. Even though this is one of my favorites that I read last year, I really do not like that in the synopsis, in the summary of this book, on Goodreads and on the sleeve of the book, they refer to one of the characters as a comfort woman. For me personally, I respect that authors are going to pull from various, historical things in order to create their stories, and I don't personally have an issue with that. But I feel like the phrase comfort woman and like that actual experience is a very specific one that is not replicated in this book at all. And so I don't know, it just makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't really like it. And it's my one thing that does frustrate me about this one. But I will say that like never in the actual book do they use the phrase comfort woman. And so I've kind of chalked it up more so to just like bad marketing than anything. But anyways, this one we follow three different characters, right? Yes, three different characters. We have the first sister. She's part of this sisterhood who basically serve the soldiers in this army in a variety of ways, emotionally and sexually. And then we have Leto Solucius, who is a soldier, and he has escaped poverty and has really like built himself up through the ranks of the military. And then you have his former partner Hero, who is basically has run away and is missing, and no one knows where they went. They're each sort of with different people on different sides of this like space war that is building and brewing, and I feel like this one really just kicked off what I think is going to be a super exciting sci-fi world. And I don't know how many books are going to be in this series. I feel like it might be a duology, but we'll see. I know I just got the second one, which I'm very excited for. It's a lot bigger actually than this first one, which I'm also excited for. But yeah, I feel like this book does such a good job of creating these very large ideas and these large like worlds and political histories, but does it in a way that is very readable and concise. And like this book just had me completely gripped from beginning to end. I was totally just enthralled by what was happening and where these characters were going, and to see how they finally like connected. And once you like get there, oh my gosh, it was just a wild time. I was not expecting anything. This is one that I would definitely recommend checking out via audiobook, because it is a full cast, which I always love, and I think that they do such a good job, like all of them, of really like creating their characters and putting together the story. So yeah, I would say if you're in the mood for a really good, just explosive sci-fi with great world building, I would highly, highly recommend this one. All right, pals, we are getting into the top 5. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited for these books and to talk about them. All right, coming in at number 5, I have Raybearer by Jordan Ufweko. I actually finally just ordered the sequel to this book, and I am so excited because I love this book so very, very much. This is another one that like, I know there are a lot of people who like used to be really into YA who don't read YA anymore and think that they wouldn't like YA fantasy, and this is one that I'm like, no, please read this book. Like, it's so good. So good. In this book, we follow Tari Sai, whose mother is called the Lady, and she grows up always sort of like idolizing her mom and wanting to like be closer to her mom. But when she's young, her mom sends her off to the capital, where she ends up being chosen as one of the Crown Prince's Council of 11. And being part of this council, it's like a bond deeper than blood. Like, you're in each other's minds, and like it's a very, very serious thing to be part of this council. But Tari Sai has also been cursed with a wish from her mom that once she gets the Crown Prince's love, she will kill him. And so that is the story that you are reading here, and it's just so good. This is definitely like one of the just best fantasies that I've read in such a long time. I feel like this is one of the few stories, like there are so few stories where I just feel totally and completely like immersed, and this is definitely one of those. Like the fantasy, the world building, the characters, like all of it just had me so completely entranced, and I loved it. I loved it so much. If you want to read something that feels magical, whimsical, amazing, that has fantastic world building and characters and relationships, and I think this is the perfect book. Then at number 4, I have another fantasy, and that is Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. So in this book, we follow 2 princesses, Ciri and Vivenna, and Ciri is very like rambunctious. She's always struggled to follow the rules. She is like very bold and bright. And then you have Vivenna, who is very much so a rule follower. She's the older sister, and she always sort of like had an idea of her role in life and was very, sort of just followed that role. So they are part of the exiled royal family. They live in Idris, and Idris is very much so devoid of any sort of color, and very opposite to Teteler, which is the capital of Halandrin, the kingdom of Halandrin, and that very much so is complete opposite. Like everything's bright and bold. It's sort of like Vegas almost. And the magic of this world is also through color, which I thought was just absolutely fascinating to read about. In this book, we follow each of the sisters. Ciri ends up getting betrothed to the king, the god king of Teteler, and then Vivenna ends up running away to try and save Ciri, which is very outside of Vivenna's normal character. So yeah, it's both of their stories. I just totally fell in love with the two sisters in this book, and the plot in this one is just exceptional. Brandon Sanderson is just so good at like writing plots. I feel like his fantasy novels almost read like amazing mystery novels in how everything unfolds. Like they're just so good, and I feel like he really is able to just like rip the rug out from under you in a way that's so like mind-boggling and fun and enthralling. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one, really loved it. I also love that it is a standalone, so if you're just looking for a good one-off fantasy read, this is a fantastic one to pick up. I also think it's a great place to start with Brandon Sanderson if you aren't interested in starting with a whole series. A standalone is a great spot to begin, and I feel like this is a really good one because it's super fun, and it definitely like gives you a good taste of his style. All right, y'all, we are in the top 3 books section. Yeah, I'm so excited for these. The first one coming in at number 3. Oh my gosh, do I actually want this to be number 3? I'm second guessing myself. It's so hard to choose because I love all these books. Okay, yeah, coming in at number 3 is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Oh my goodness, I loved this book so much. I would say this is the best like romance that I have read ever. Like, here's the thing, it's not a romance novel like in the like sense of like a romance genre, but it's the best like romance, you know? Like the yearning, the feeling of just all encompassing love, like it's so good. It just hits in a way that like I've never been able to find with like romance novels before, or like really any fiction that I've read before. If you don't know, The Song of Achilles, it is the story of Achilles and Patroclus and their romance, their relationship, their story, their history, the story of the war and the tragedy of their life, and it's so good. I left this book in just like a state of complete disarray. And it took weeks to recover from just how much this book impacted my heart. I have a whole playlist on Spotify that sometimes I'll just go still and I'll listen to just when I want to feel something, if I want to have a little cry. I'll go and do that. But yeah, I love this book so much. I love this story so much. I love these characters so deeply. And I'm just so thankful for this book. I'm so happy that I read it in 2021. Now, in terms of my top book of the year, like that isn't part of a series, I will say that Song of Achilles is number 1. And I debated whether or not I should include these next 2 because they are parts of series. But I can't lie and say that they aren't my number 1 and number 2 books of the whole year. So that's that. Anyways, coming in at number 2 is Hollowpox by Jessica Townsend, and this is the 3rd book in the Morgan Crow Nevermore series. It's the newest book that's out so far, and this book really solidified this series as just one of my absolute favorite things being published right now. Basically, if you're not familiar with the series, this follows Morgan Crow, who her whole life has been told that she is the reason why all bad things are happening in her village, and that she is a curse, and she's also been told that she is expected to die on her 11th birthday, and she doesn't know how and she doesn't know when, but she just knows that's going to happen. But on her 11th birthday, she ends up being rescued and whisked away by this man called Jupiter North, who brings her to the land of Nevermore, where cats can talk, and there's this secret society called the Wondrous Society that Jupiter is a part of, and he is entering Morrigan into these trials in order to be part of the society herself. So that's the first book, and she lives with Jupiter in this like magical hotel, and so there's this whole found family element to the story, and I love this series with my whole heart. Like, the first 2 books are so fun, so whimsical, just such an amazing time, but this third one I feel like really sets the trajectory for where I think the series is potentially going to go, or just how much the series is going to grow with Morrigan. So like, we start with Morrigan when she's 11 years old, and I believe that this is going to be 9 books long, and that we're going to follow Morrigan into, you know, her late teens, early adult years. And I just feel like we are going to see her really make some complicated and difficult decisions, like she's already starting to make in this book. And I feel like this sets up some like really complex storytelling and themes that I am so excited to see pan out in future books. Like, I feel like this just elevated the whole series in a way that makes me so excited. All right, this last one, I feel like for some of you is not going to come as any surprise. There are probably quite a few of you who already know what book I'm about to hold up, but yeah, we're just gonna go with it. Number 1, Rule of Wolves by Leigh Bardugo. Obviously, this had to be number 1. I love this book. I thought it was absolutely perfection. Just no one can say a thing that's bad about this book that I agree with. And like, obviously, like, all opinions are valid. They're just not my opinions. This is the conclusion to the Grishaverse in general. Leigh Bardugo has referred to this as the basically like series finale of the entire Grishaverse, and I feel like this is such a perfect finale. Like, I am very hard to please when it comes to like the final books in series, and this book somehow like just did everything that I wanted, but like nothing that I could have expected. Honestly, I'd kind of compare it to the new Spider-Man in that way, in that like I felt totally like fulfilled and satisfied, but also just like completely floored and wowed, you know? This is the second book in the Nikolai duology, and I love Nikolai. He is my favorite character of maybe all time. Definitely in the Grishaverse, he is my number 1 favorite, and definitely one of my all-time favorite characters in general. I love him. I love the Grishaverse. And for me, I love this book so much because I feel like it does such a good job of like bringing in new elements while also like wrapping up all of these like loose ends from all of the other books and stories. And I love the way that it ends, because I feel like, and I'm not gonna, no spoilers, but I just feel like she does such a good job of giving us an ending that is satisfying and fulfilling, but also leaves the door open, which she's talked about. She's talked about how she wanted to leave the door open in case she did ever eventually want to come back to this world. And I feel like she really like balanced that perfectly, where it felt conclusive, it feels like a proper ending, but it also feels like, yeah, there's room for more. And definitely I know people want more, but I also like that because I feel like it leaves it open for the reader to also like interpret and decide like what happens next, while also not being just like completely open-ended, you know? I can't really talk about really any specifics about this book because it's the final book in an 8-book universe, so I don't want to give anything away, but I will say, if you are someone who has read the Grisha books, the Six of Crows books, you haven't read the Nikolai duology yet, which I know a lot of Grisha fans are in that boat, please read these books. They're so good. They're so fantastic, especially if you are a fantasy reader who tends to like a more political like style of fantasy. I definitely think you'll like these. Like for me, and one thing that I really love about Leigh Bardugo's like Grishaverse in general is that I feel like each series feels like, even though they're all fantasy, they feel like their own distinct like sub-genre of fantasy, and I love that about her stories. Like when I think about each of the series within the Grishaverse, like they're so unique and different while also being like so beautifully interconnected, and I feel like Rule of Wolves and King of Scars really just elevates it to a whole other level, and brings it up into like that epic fantasy sort of area, which I love, I adore. So yeah, I love this book with my whole heart. I feel like 2021 was very much so like the year of the Grishaverse for a lot of people, and especially for me, and I'm just, yeah, very happy with all of it. So yes, those are all of my absolute favorite books of 2021. Again, I would love to hear from you all what some of your favorite books were. Please let me know in the comments down below. And once again, thank you so much to Karma for sponsoring this video. I will again have them linked down below in case you want to check them out. But yeah, I am gonna go drink some water and then not talk for the next like few hours because I have talked so much. So yeah, I will talk to y'all later. Bye.